Hello, everybody. Welcome to There and Back Again. We have an exciting video for you today. We were able to connect with James Tauber. He's a linguist, software engineer, and he co-founded Digital Tolkien Project, which we're going to talk about today. So don't forget to like the video and subscribe for our walkthrough of Lord of the Rings, along with great videos like this interview with James. All right. So first off, James, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to getting to talk to you about this.
It's great to be here.
Awesome. Um, Yeah, dude, you have so many different like titles and things that you do. I was looking at your website to be like, okay, cool. What does he do? And first off, just look at it's jtauber.com, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So look at that because you have everything listed. And then, but you're the co-founder of the Digital Tolkien Project. You're a linguist, an entrepreneur, composer. And then at Signum University, director of digital humanities and education software. You're a preceptor, visiting lecturer. Am I missing anything that needs to be out right now?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like a lot of different things, but fundamentally, what I've always been interested in is taking any scholarly subject and thinking
Mm.
about how do we model that with a computer
Oh,
and how do we teach it? That's
oh,
really the
cool.
sort of the fundamental unifying things in when I look back at my life, whether it's music or language or literature or biology or whatever it is, astronomy, it comes down to how do we think about it computationally and how
Mm,
do we teach it is sort of the fundamental theme
okay.
of my life, I think,
That's
so far at
awesome.
least.
That's awesome. All right. One kind of this is a little bit of a side note, but how did you get like hooked up and like connected with Signum, like initially, Signum University with
Yeah,
pouring your
so I
stuff?
found out about Signum through a talk that Michael Drought gave.
Okay.
The talk was actually given, I think, in 2014, and I probably heard it more like 2017, or at least it's when I took action on it. So this was a talk that he gave at Carnegie Mellon, and he was talking about why Tolkien is an interesting author
Mm,
and why he's worth reading. And
a lot of reasons.
I'd been a Tolkien fan for a long time, and we'll get into that. But it, for whatever reason, I think it was the first time I realized that Tolkien scholarship was a thing, that
Mm,
people actually studied Tolkien academically. And I went looking for, well, who's doing this sort of study? And
yeah.
Michael Drought was obviously a prominent person, but it was through that that I found out about the Mythgard Academy and then Signum University. And my background was in linguistics, and I had a strong focus in historical linguistics, particularly ancient Greek.
Mm,
But I was interested sort of more broadly in other languages, ancient languages and their relationship and so on. Very difficult thing to study outside conventional education, right? It's the
yeah.
sort of thing that there's only a few universities that teach that kind of stuff, and you would normally need to be a full time residential student or whatever. Made it very difficult. I'd always been a big believer in online education, and I was involved in a lot of stuff with MOOCs in the early 2010s. I worked for MIT on the edX project, and there was plenty of stuff there for particularly computer science and biology and things like that. But there was nothing available that was sort of teaching historical linguistics
Hmm.
and Germanic philology and all that kind of stuff. And so Signum was an amazing find there because all of a sudden I discovered I could study this stuff. So I
Wow.
enrolled as a graduate student at Signum University, and then ended up becoming involved both in teaching there, but also in developing software for them.
Okay.
And so all of the software that does all the course management and student enrollment, whether it's on the graduate program or their continuing education program
Yeah.
space, I wrote all that software.
Okay.
So that's but my connection there has been both teaching and writing the software.
Okay. Awesome. Was that that Michael Drought talk? Was that the one where he? Well, I guess there's probably a lot, and he probably talked about before, but talked about uh oh goodness, it's escaping me now. Um, Textual ruins.
Yes, he
That's
does
kind
talk
of the
about
big
texture
one.
ruins
Okay.
there. Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
and
It's a great talk, and it really it as I said, it introduced me to this idea that one could actually study Tolkien.
yeah,
There were people out there doing
yeah.
doing
I'll see.
Tolkien studies
I'll have
academically.
to. I'll
Yeah,
find that if I can.
yeah,
I'll link that down
yeah.
because
It's on
I did
YouTube.
watch
Yeah,
that
I
one.
think
It's
it was.
great. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
super cool. Okay, so That's awesome. I like that. Yeah. So it's what? It's BlackBerry that does like all the space stuff at Tolkien. Then
For
what's
the
the other one
space
called?
stuff, and then Goldberry is the one that does
Goldberry.
the graduate program.
Of
Yep.
course. I don't know how I could
Yep.
forget Goldberry.
Yep.
All right. So I was listening to, I think I'm caught up on Prancing Pony right now.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so just like at this point, it was like 3 weeks ago, when you guys were going over, I'm gonna get the appendix wrong. I want to say E. It's probably wrong. All the
E's
languages.
E's the language. Well,
Ah,
E and F are the language ones.
okay.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're going over that, and you talk
Yep.
about your Tolkien origin story,
Mhm.
which first off is fascinating, but I like it totally, and I want to hear how it does this too, but it totally
Yep.
leads into like digital Tolkien project,
Oh,
which
yeah,
which we'll talk
absolutely.
about. So to give us that like that origin story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my initial starting point's pretty conventional. I read The Hobbit as a 10 or 11-year-old and
Yeah.
was a huge fan of The Hobbit. It was my favorite book as an 11-year-old. And, my it must have been known to my family that I was a massive fan of this because for my 12th birthday, my aunt bought me Return of the King.
Okay.
I don't know whether she thought, "Oh, I'll get." I have no idea what what her thinking was. Whether she just grabbed a random Tolkien book, or if, well, she was worried I'd already read Fellowship or something. But she bought me Return of the King, and very clearly said on the Allen and Unwin paperback that I had the third
Mm,
part of the Lord of the Rings. So it was clear that I I couldn't read it. Um, But I was flicking through it and I discovered at the back these appendices. And of course, what grabs you as you're flicking through is there's this chart of the Tengwar and the
mm,
Kirth. And I'm looking at this Tengwar and just thinking, this is beautiful, this writing. I want to learn to write like that. And so I started teaching myself the Tengwar, which
mm,
is quite difficult to do from Appendix E on its own, because Appendix E is very much written like an academic publication. It's sort of written in the way that grammars of historical languages were
mm.
written when Tolkien was studying them. So if you
Yeah.
pick up, anything by Joseph Wright, who was Tolkien's philology professor, teacher, and mentor. He wrote grammars of the Gothic language and of ancient Greek and Old English. If you look at the way they're structured, they'll always start off with just listing the sounds in the language and then showing the alphabet and what the correspondences between the sounds and the letters are. But I'm reading all this stuff, and I actually became really fascinated by the the linguistic side of it, right?
Mm,
Because this is Appendix E gets into a lot of linguistic detail, and I was just started to become fascinated by this whole thing, and that planted this seed that didn't come to fruition for quite a while. Um, but I became really interested in. I just sort of loved this whole um, world building aspect of what Tolkien had done, and it must have been shortly after that that I stumbled across Bob Foster's Complete Guide to Middle Earth.
mm,
And so I actually bought that. And for those of you who aren't aware, it's essentially an encyclopedia in the pre-Wikipedia days of a book with entries that you could read that just covered the whole at the time anyway known Tolkien legendarium.
yeah.
Uh, it was actually a revised version of something called the Guide to Middle Earth. The Guide to Middle Earth came out before the Silmarillion did, and then when the Silmarillion came out in
Oh.
1977, it got revised to the Complete Guide to Middle Earth. So even though it's got complete in the title, it doesn't include anything from Unfinished Tales or History of Middle Earth or anything
Oh,
like that.
wow.
It's this sort of wonderful time capsule of what was known about Tolkien's
Yeah,
legendarium
yeah.
after the Silmarillion. So I started reading this, and there was something about approaching the world from the point of view of an encyclopedia rather than reading fictional narrative that really appealed to me, and it felt so real to me because I'm reading an encyclopedia about it. These people must be real, right? These places that it's talking about. You can look up an entry about a person, it'll tell you who their father was, and you can read that entry, and you can see where they were born, and you can read the entry about that place, and all that kind of stuff. But of course, a lot of it, because the complete guide was based on the Silmarillion, it covered the Silmarillion as well as Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I was reading a lot of Silmarillion material, and I was really drawn to that. I hadn't read Lord of the Rings at this point, right? I owned a copy of Return of the King and had looked at the appendices, particularly Appendix E, but hadn't read it. And I don't know how I would have come across this. It's a funny thing looking back at my pre-internet childhood and wondering how on earth I discovered things now. Like we take for granted how easy it
Yep.
is. But at some point, as a 12-year-old, I must have read somewhere that the Silmarillion was notoriously difficult
Mm.
to understand. And as the cocky 12-year-old that I was, I took that as a challenge, right? I'm like, I'm gonna read the Silmarillion. So I borrowed the Silmarillion from the library and I read the Ainulindalë, the first chapter, and
Mm.
absolutely loved it. But I struggled to get any further. But that really stuck with me. So all through my early teens, my knowledge of Tolkien was The Hobbit, Appendix E, and the Ainulindalë.
A bit
And so
unconventional.
it was really funny because I would come across other Tolkien fans and they would talk about Frodo, and I'm like, "Who's Frodo? Bilbo's the Hobbit I know." And I knew all about Melkor, right? Melkor was the name that he's later known as Morgoth, the principal enemy of the Silmarillion. But in the Ainulindalë, his original name is Melkor. So I
Yeah.
just know Melkor as the bad guy. Um, didn't really know about Sauron or anything of that sort of stuff. So it's a very, very twisted um, view of things, and I just became really interested in the languages and the First Age. Not from the Silmarillion directly because I found that too difficult to read. I would look at Foster's Complete Guide to Middle Earth.
Mm.
So I had a much more of this sort of um, sense of the world in terms of the people and places and stuff like that, rather
Yeah.
than the stories.
Yeah.
And it actually wasn't until the Peter Jackson films came out. I saw the first two Peter Jackson films, Fellowship and Two Towers, before I'd read Lord of the Rings.
Oh, wow.
So it's really funny. Obviously, the world is split into people that saw the films first versus read the books first, and I'm a to a certain extent a films first person, except that I'd already read the I was already familiar with so much of the even the First Age stuff because
Yeah.
of Complete Guide to Middle Earth and so on. So it was wacky, and then I decided before Return of the King came out, I would actually read them all. So sometime between when Two Towers came out and when Return of the King came out, I read Lord of the Rings. And obviously I've read it many times since, and I ended up finally reading the Silmarillion many times and Unfinished Tales. And of course, um, I may be one of the few people that's read the entire history of Middle Earth as well, because I taught a class on it
Yeah.
back in 2023. Um, I had this crazy idea. So I'll quickly tell this story. So
Yeah.
I was in New York for an advanced screening of Rings of Power. Um, that Amazon had put on, and a group of us that had been invited by Amazon. We saw the screening, the advanced screening, the first two episodes, and then we went out to a a pub, an Irish pub that was still open in New York City at 2 a.m. And we put together a ad hoc uh, pub quiz and everything like that. And Corey Olsen and I were the judges of that. We're the only two that weren't drinking. Um, I seem to recall. But anyway, we got chatting, and I all of a sudden had this idea. I said to Corey, "There's 12 volumes of the history of Middle Earth. There's 12 months in a year. Space classes at Signum, these are adult continuing education courses, go for a month each. What if I taught a sequence of 12 classes, one on each volume of the history of Middle Earth?" And Corey said, "That's a great idea. Do it." And so that's for better or worse, that's what I did in 2023. Tried to compress each volume of the history of Middle Earth down into a single month. And it ended up that blowing up, and I needed Sarah Brown's help and Tom Hillman
Mm.
uh, and Patrick Lyon all came in to help me teach it because we ended up with so many students. And then I had John Garth come in once a month
Oh,
as a guest lecturer as well. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, so if you look back at all of what I've just said, the reading order of things is a little strange, but
yeah.
I
That's the
got I got
most.
through it all in the end.
Yeah. That's like the most circuitous route I've ever come
Oh,
across of
so
something.
I there's one bit I missed, which is
Mm.
I actually had um during that phase in my late teens, before the Peter Jackson films had come out, Peter Jackson films didn't come out until I was in my late 20s. But
Mm.
as I said, the only part of the Silmarillion I'd read was the Ainulindale. And I was interested in music and composing music. And I think any composer who is a fan of Tolkien at some point has thought, well, what if I like composed my own version of the Ainulindale? So 15-year-old me had that as a goal in life.
Mm.
And so I wanted to know more about the Ainulindale. And this was around the time, so this was late 80s. This was around the time that the volumes of the History of Middle Earth were coming out.
Yeah.
And I think volume 4 had come out a year earlier, and volume 5 just came out. And those volumes talked about, particularly volume 5, had descriptions of, well, volume 4, Shaping of Middle Earth, had a bit of description of the creation, but didn't cover the Ainulindale.
Yeah.
5 has more of that sort of stuff. And so I actually started reading the Ainulindale and creation parts of those volumes. Again, before I'd read Lord of the Rings. So my reading order was actually sort of The Hobbit, Appendix E, the Ainulindale from the Silmarillion, along with a complete guide to Middle Earth, and then various bits of History of Middle Earth. And then 10 years later, uh, because of the Peter Jackson films, finally went back and read Lord of the Rings.
That's amazing. Yeah, you're in this. Usually we say, the pre and post. You read it
Right,
before or after.
right,
You're kind of in this like weird, like the intersection of Venn diagram where you like
right.
kind of read it, but also yeah,
Yes,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So tell us. Well, I want to know. I want to know how. I guess kind of how that,
Mhm,
because it's such a unique. It still blows my mind. It's such a unique way you got into it, but
mhm.
how that led into you creating the digital Tolkien project. But I feel like give me your 30-second pitch of what the digital Tolkien project is, and then we can
Yep,
talk about how you got to it, and then
sure.
we can actually talk like about it.
Yeah, perfect. The elevator pitch, which will lead nicely then into the origin story. The elevator pitch is, what if we treated the works of Tolkien the way that we treat uh, ancient texts like Homer or the Old Testament,
Mm,
in terms of our study of their language and our compilation of data about places and
yeah.
people, and use computers to do that. That's basically the
Okay.
pitch. What if we treated them, that the works of Tolkien, like those texts in a modern sort of computational way? And so to explain how I got there, so I mentioned you mentioned that I studied as a linguist, and I still continue to do research as a linguist. Um, and most of the language work that I did as an undergraduate was in ancient Greek,
Okay.
and still to this day, my linguistic focus has largely been on ancient Greek. And one of the things that's different about ancient Greek, or about historical languages generally, as opposed to studying modern languages like most linguists do, is that you don't have native speakers that you can
Mm,
elicit information from. One of the ways that linguists work is to uh, either draw on intuitions that they have about their own languages, or elicit information from native speakers. So
yeah.
they'll talk to a speaker of a particular language and try to work out how the language works from that. In the case of historical languages, our data source is text,
Yeah.
right? So we spend a lot of time studying texts, and really there's a lot of benefit to doing that computationally.
Mm,
So if I'm trying to understand how adjectives work in New Testament Greek, the way I do that is to take the Greek New Testament as data and look for patterns computationally, write software
yeah.
to look for patterns and find counterexamples, and when does the adjective get put here in the sentence, and when does it get put there, and are there differences, and so on. Or with Homer, or whatever, or maybe it's Dante in the Italian, the
Mm,
Florentine Italian, or Beowulf in Old English, whatever it
yeah.
is, right? There's a lot of that kind of stuff, and that does get done for modern languages too. There's a whole field of linguistics that is sort of the part that I mostly work in, corpus linguistics, which is this study of the way languages are used, but often in texts,
Mm,
and um, and that's a necessity in historical linguistics, but it can also be done for modern languages as well. So I'd done a lot of work, particularly with ancient Greek, writing software for doing analysis of the texts and so on. And I mean, even before you get to the analysis, there's a lot of just preparation you have to do
Mm,
in the text of getting it in digital form, and thinking about the way that you structure that and so on. Most ancient texts, unlike modern texts, when you want to refer to a particular passage, you want to do it in a way that transcends the particular edition that you have. Like if
mm,
I'm picking up a modern novel or something like that, in most cases, if it's only gone through one edition or something, I can just tell you a page number and say, "Hey, go look at page 57.
yeah.
There's a funny quote there," or something like that, right? But in ancient texts, you don't do that, right? You don't go to church and say, "Okay, turn your Bibles to page 38," right? Instead, you say book, chapter, verse, right? So
Yeah.
there's this structure that developed um,
Mm,
in the like 16th century, conventions for how we're going to identify parts of the text, book, chapter, verse. And exactly the same thing happened with any of the texts that were studied then, whether it's Homer or Plato and Aristotle and so on. They all have these systems for referring to the text.
yeah.
And so a big part of working with these texts on a computer is getting them in a form that has those references and all that kind of stuff. And so I ended up doing a lot of work, initially with biblical languages, but then more broadly, historical languages and the broader ancient Greek. I worked and still work on a project called the Perseus Digital Library, which is the major open um, digital library of ancient Greek
Okay.
texts. So pretty much any ancient Greek text, literary text, so not scraps of papyrus that are inventories of what's in the jars in the storeroom or something, but sort of literary text stories
Yeah.
and so on, accounts of things. It has all of those digitized, and I one of the things that I've been working on the last 10 years is the reading environment for the Perseus Digital Library.
Mm,
And so I'm thinking a lot about, how do you represent texts online, particularly in languages that are less familiar to people. How do you provide the support for understanding those languages? How do you bring in information about characters that are mentioned or places? Do you showing them on a map and all this kind of stuff? So how do you help people engage with difficult texts,
yeah.
historical texts? And so that's really the background, coming back to that elevator pitch that I gave, which is I've discovered through Michael Drought and then Signum that there are people that study Tolkien in an academic way, alongside the fact that I'm building this software for helping people understand these historical texts better, and rich
Mm,
reading environments that let you engage with the text, but also get lots of references side by side, help with the language, the people, the places, all that kind of stuff. And it all of a sudden occurred to me, well, why can't I apply the techniques of the latter to the former? One
yeah.
of the things, it's funny when you talk to people who work with historical languages, and biblical texts and stuff like that, that are also Tolkien fans. They'll often say that, "Oh, Tolkien more than any other modern author reminds me of the whatever the work of my primary work of study is," right? So
Yeah.
I've spoken to biblical scholars that say, Silmarillion is the closest thing to the Old Testament. Or I'll talk to classicists who say, it's the closest thing to Homer or whatever, right? There's all this sort of analogies always get made. And I'm like, well, if I'm working on software to help people better understand Homer or the Old Testament, why not do that for
Yeah.
Tolkien as well?
Yeah.
For the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. And so that's how the digital Tolkien project came about. And of course, what that then involves is a whole nother thing that we can get into. But that's the origin story and the motivation. It was really just applying the ideas in one field to a new set of texts.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I can see that trail then. It's like the appendix to the linguist.
Right.
and the study then kind of just transitioning like really seamlessly
Yeah, I
into
mean, I
this
think
with
it's
each new bit of info,
yeah.
like whatever information.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. So one, I mentioned Appendix E, planting a seed.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd kind of forgotten about this to a certain extent until when I started my undergraduate studies, I actually started in mathematics and physics. I wanted to be a theoretical physicist. But then I
As one
started here.
does.
And I started hearing about this field of linguistics, and I started
Mm.
attending some lectures, and I just absolutely loved it. And I ended up switching majors to linguistics. But one of the first classes I did was in phonetics and phonology, the study of the
Mm.
sounds that make up languages. And I'm sitting in class and they're talking about the different ways that different sounds are made and the way you classify different sounds. And they would use these terms. And I'm like, I know these terms. How do I know these terms? And then I realized they're in Appendix E. I'm sitting in this lecture and I know this stuff because Tolkien used the same terminology or similar terminology in Appendix E to describe the sounds of his Elvish languages.
That's crazy.
And so I sort of realized that seed had been planted, when I was 12
Yeah.
years old. And this view of language, the ability to study a language in a very systematic, scientific
Yeah.
way was I think the takeaway there. But the other connection I was
Yeah.
just going to make is that, of course, because of things like Robert Foster's Complete Guide to Middle
Yeah.
Earth, my whole way of thinking about Tolkien was about who are the people, who are the places, what are the events, rather than the narrative. Well, not rather than, but at least as much as the narrative story. So
Okay.
what was
Yeah.
primary in my mind was not, I remember this passage where this happened, as I know the people, I know the family trees, I know the places, I know
Mm.
the maps. That kind of stuff was at such a forefront for me, because that had been my focus as a teenager. And that's true of uh, the Bible and Homer and Beowulf, and so like obviously you need to read the text, but there's also a lot of paratextual material, right? There are books that are just maps of the Bible or
Yeah.
timelines or family trees and all that kind of stuff, right? And Tolkien's unusual for a modern writer in that you get the same kinds of things. Um, Timelines and maps and family trees and so on. So it just sort of all came together really nicely. Uh, and I'm thinking that somebody should take all these modern digital
Yeah.
computational approaches and apply them to Tolkien.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's so cool. So let's see. I want to share this. We can get it to go. Okay, so we have Digital Tolkien Project. This is the main page. I want to just kind of look and maybe
Yep.
you can guide me through a couple things to do of like
Sure.
awesome uses and why we should be using this more.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the challenges, before I get into some of
Yeah.
this stuff, one of the challenges, of course, with dealing with the Tolkien text as opposed to all the other texts I keep
Mm.
mentioning, is that it's still under copyright. Right.
Oh
So
yeah.
unlike what I do um, with Homer, say, where I can just freely distribute, I can put up a reading environment where you can
Yeah.
read Homer and get all the actual extra material. I can show side by side and so on, and have this sort of rich reading environment.
Mm.
I can't do that
Yeah.
with Tolkien, and so there are some areas where, like, I'm trying to apply the same techniques, but there are certain things that need to be done to separate the text from the annotations. I
Yeah.
can't share annotated text, but I can share the results and, to a certain extent, data that's tied into the text. And it does mean people have to have the text and they have to have ways of uh, tying that all together. So that will become important in what I go into first. But just to kind of take advantage of what you're showing on the screen now, and all these various parts. So the Digital Talking Project is really a big umbrella for a ton of different things,
Yeah.
that we're doing. One of the very first things we did, and I'll get into this in a little more detail in a moment, but first of all, providing a higher overview. One of the first things I needed to do was have a referencing system, a citation system
Yeah.
for the text of Tolkien. I mentioned before the book chapter verse scheme in the Bible, right? I needed something similar for Tolkien. So instead of talking about page numbers, you can talk about a particular passage in Lord of the Rings in terms of its book, its chapter, and
Mhm.
its paragraph number.
Yeah.
And so once you have that and people agree um, on that system, then that's helpful because a lot of the annotations then can be done in relation to that. So you don't have to hand around annotated versions of the text. You can hand around annotations that just tell you the reference.
Yeah.
So if you could give a list of all of the places where Frodo speaks, for example, um, and I'll get into that as being one of the things that we did. But you can share that data in terms of these paragraph numbers and chapter numbers and book
Okay.
numbers
Yeah,
once
yeah,
you have
yeah.
that referencing system. So we came up with a referencing system. So Eric Muller Harder had already done some work on a referencing system for Lord of the Rings, and I was pretty much able to adopt that with minor changes. I did one for The Hobbit, which also built on some work that Sparrow Alden had done, but
Mm.
then came up with a new one for the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales, and I'm still working on doing the same for History of Middle Earth and the various Great Tales books and so on.
Yeah.
One of the next things that we did, and again, I'll give a high level overview, and then we can go dive
Yeah.
in more to a couple of them. One of the next things I did was identifying the speech. So one of the interesting
Mm.
things about text is that we have various typographical conventions for how we represent stuff on the page that are ambiguous and not always consistent. So imagine you've got the task of maybe you're trying to search for a word in Lord of the Rings, but you care about whether that word is in speech or not.
Mm.
So you're interested maybe in studying how the narrator uses a word versus how a character in the story uses a word.
Yeah.
Um, you need to know for every word then, is it in speech or is it not? How do you go about finding that out? Well, your intuition might be, well, if it's in quotation marks, it's in speech, and if it's not in quotation marks, it's not. The problem with that is there are other things that quotation marks are used for.
Yeah.
Sometimes the so-called quotation marks, the scare quotes, right, where you don't want to commit to a term, you put it in quotes, um, and so that's a case where quotation marks don't mean speech.
Yeah.
But there are also cases where speech is not in quotation marks. So, for example, in Bilbo's party speech at the start of Lord of the Rings, a lot of his speech is in italics, not in quotes.
Oh.
And so you want to include that. And in fact, I had an incident before I kind of took that into account. I was doing a study of language by the narrator's language,
Hmm.
and in Lord of the Rings, and whether it changed from chapter to chapter. And I initially falsely thought, oh, the narrator in chapter one sounds much more Hobbit-like.
Mm.
And I thought maybe that was because, Tolkien was still writing a book in the style of The Hobbit and hadn't really gained that shift in style. Then I realized, no, it was being thrown off because Bilbo's speech is in italics, not in quotes. And so initially I was not counting that as speech, I was counting that as part of the narration. So of course the
Oh.
narration sounded more Hobbit-like because it was actually Bilbo talking.
Yeah. Whoa.
And so I had to change things and say, okay, no, I can't rely on little heuristics like, is it in quotation marks? I have to
Yeah.
explicitly mark up whether something is speech or not. Whether it's,
Wow.
sometimes it's in italics, sometimes it's in
Yeah.
quotation marks. And of course, just because it's in italics doesn't mean it's speech either. Italics is used for a lot of things other than speech.
Yeah.
So you have to do this sort of separation of the presentation in the text from what the underlying meaning
Yeah.
in the text is. And that's an important part. So I did that for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, cleanly separated what's speech versus what's not. And I did a master's dissertation a couple of years ago that was looking at. I decided to do it on Tolkien and was looking at differences in Tolkien's style across books, and
Mm.
I also wanted to look at differences in style amongst speakers within the book, within say Lord of the Rings. Right? How do the hobbits speak differently from the elves? Does
Mm.
Frodo speak differently from Sam?
Yeah.
Does Frodo's speech change over time? Right, those kind of questions need you to go a step further, not just identifying what the speech is, but who's doing the speaking. Like, you need to
Mhm.
know for every single word who is saying it.
Yeah.
And so this was the first really collaborative thing we did at the Digital Tolkien Project. I know I needed this data, and so I said to a group of people that were interested in the project, "Hey, could you help me out?" And we went through every single bit of speech in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The Silmarillion, and just indicated in a spreadsheet who's saying it. This is Frodo, this is Gandalf, this is Legolas, this is Gandalf quoting Isildur, this is Gandalf quoting Saruman, and so on. And this turned out to be really, really interesting data, because then we could do all sorts of studies on the way that different characters speak. Just
Yeah.
to give one example that I covered in my dissertation, if you look at whether somebody says don't or do not, um, is there a difference in, are there characters that say don't all the time? Are there characters that say do not all the time? Are there characters
Yeah.
that switch back and forth? And it turns out, so first of all, almost everyone in The Hobbit says don't. No one in the Silmarillion says don't. Everyone in the Silmarillion says do not.
Hmm.
And so you start to get this. So this is interesting, right? Elves, the more formal speech, will not contract. They'll say do not. The hobbits are more likely to say don't. But then if you start looking at individual characters in Lord of the Rings, some interesting things emerge. Again, in Lord of the Rings, the elves never contract. They always say do not.
Mhm.
The
Okay.
Gondorians always say do not. The dwarves always say do not. Most of the hobbits say don't, though.
Okay.
Always. Sam always says don't. Sam never says
Yeah.
do not. Bilbo always says don't. He never says do not.
Interesting.
And then the really interesting thing is the characters that use both. Who are
Yeah.
the characters that sometimes use don't, sometimes use do not? Because I think that's a really good indication of speakers that are able to change their register depending on who they're talking to. And
Can I
that,
make a guess?
yeah, go for it.
Frodo and Gandalf. Those are just my two guesses that did.
You're
Okay.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. In fact, Frodo, Merry, and Frodo, Merry, and Pippin.
Mm.
Frodo, Merry, and Pippin will all do both. They
Oh, okay.
predominantly contract. So, like the
Okay.
other hobbits, they favor contracting. But you're absolutely right. Gandalf is equally happy with saying don't and do not. The other person
So
that is equally
interesting.
the other person that does that is Aragorn.
Oh, yeah.
So Aragorn is the only one of this the sort of the only Dunedain and really sort of in that sort of broader Gondorian sense is the only person that will sometimes contract. He only does
Yeah.
it about 12% of the time, so it's not
Mm.
high up there, but it's interesting. The only other character that I think is really, really interesting is Saruman. Doesn't contract at all when we first meet him. He's a do not person
Okay.
all the way through. The first time he says don't is when he's a beggar on the road in book 6.
Mm.
So there's this transformation that's happened to him that's
Hmm.
evident even just in this little language thing. So
Yeah.
the point of all this is that this kind of study was only possible because we'd done this analysis, we'd done this annotation of the text. We'd gone
Yeah.
through and identified what all the speech is, who all the speakers are. And then that's what enables us to do this kind of thing.
That's so cool.
And really that's sort of encapsulates a lot of what we're trying to do is how can we annotate the texts to answer interesting research questions.
Yeah.
Another thing is if you're trying to do sort of an analysis of how much time is spent in different regions or how long characters are in different places and so on. It's not enough just to know that a character is mentioned in a place.
Mm-hmm.
It matters far more knowing who is there in the scene. And so we do care about
Yeah.
where words are used, but we also care about where are people located. And so we've been undertaking this huge annotation project for the last year or two to go through every paragraph of Lord of the Rings and identify where are we, who's there, and we're
Okay.
getting to also like what time, what
Yeah.
date it is and what time of day it is.
And
Because
you can cross-reference all of that in an amazing, like, I'm just thinking, like,
exactly. Yeah.
Pippin says do not probably when he's in Minas Tirith.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Like that
exactly.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So in order to be able to look for those kind of patterns, you need to have that sort of data.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
that's one of the things that we're compiling. Another thing that we're doing is not just on sort of annotating the text, but also annotating the words. And I'll bring up an example of this in a moment on the site. So there's a bunch of research questions that are not to do with what's happening in this particular paragraph, but what are the properties of this particular word. So
Mm,
one of the things that people have speculated on is, does Tolkien use more Germanic words in certain parts rather than words from Latin?
wow. Okay.
In order to answer those kind of questions, like it could be, does a speaker use more Germanic words than Latinate words, or it could be, does a particular part of the text or a particular
Yeah.
region, does Tolkien use more Germanic words when we're in Rohan? Does he use more Latinate words when we're in, I don't know, Gondor or something like that?
Yeah.
Those kind of questions are only answerable not only if you know where the characters are, but also if you know which words are Latinate and which words
Yeah.
are Germanic. So there's a lot of sort of data about the words that we care about. And so another major project that we've been working on is something called the Tolkien glossary. So now would actually be a great time.
Mm,
Let's actually switch
yeah.
back to the site, and we can dive into a couple of things. So I want to show you search and cite Tolkien and tie that into the citation systems. And then I'll show you the Tolkien glossary, and then we can finish up talking about a bunch of other stuff on this list.
Okay. So search
Um,
Tolkien, that one.
yeah, so if you click on search Tolkien, so um, so this gives information about it, but then if you actually, there's a link there to
Oh, okay. There we go.
search.digitaltolkien.com. Yep. And so this actually started off as a way of answering the question, what is the citation I should use for this paragraph I'm currently reading?
Yeah.
So in fact, I'll take a book and we can do a live demo here. So if I just pick up a copy of Lord of the Rings and I read the text, the thought came suddenly into Pippin's mind. So if you just start typing, the thought came suddenly, thought, the
Oh,
thought,
thought.
not
My
thought.
bad. Whew. I blame digital compression for that.
um, I don't know why it's, of course, because we're doing this live. Yeah, click go.
Well, yeah.
We should have potentially primed this. Occasionally it has issues, like it's having now, of course.
Yeah. Oh, you know. Okay. Let me do this. Copy
maybe,
that so I don't have to type it again.
yeah,
And just
sure.
refresh.
There we go.
Oh, there we
There
go.
we go.
Okay.
So that phrase alone, the thought came suddenly, occurs in book 3, chapter 3, and book 6, chapter 3. If you type, the next word is into. Let's see, but I don't know why it's having
Huh.
problems. Strange. Occasionally does the hosting provider sometimes has problems. Do whatever you did before to get it to work.
I just. Oh yeah. Refresh
There,
goes super quick. Okay.
okay. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, you see the point. Now we've added the word into. We uniquely know we're in
And
LR 3.03.107, which
okay.
is the citation for this paragraph. So that's
Third
the
book,
original.
third chapter, 107th paragraph.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was the original motivation for this site. Start typing a paragraph, get the reference. But
Yeah.
it also has a bunch of other interesting things. If you want to find out where Tolkien uses a particular word or phrase or whatever,
Mm,
this gives you a search engine across Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Silmarillion, and the letters as well.
okay.
So rather than have to go to, like, even if you've got a Kindle, you have to go to each individual book and find it,
Yes.
and you
Yep.
don't get this nice kind of overview. And one of the fun things you could do. So let's see if it works now. Clear that and type in like love. Say the word love, and just refresh it. It'll probably
Yeah.
it
We just
seems
got to
to
keep
it
refreshing.
seems to
Yeah.
work fine. Okay,
Oh,
so we get this immediate illustration of how many times the word love appears in each of these works. And you can drill down. So, okay, it appears in Lord of the Rings 94 times, but what's the breakdown by book? So if you click that plus, you can expand. Actually, if you could do open to level 2 in that top right bit, then it'll kind of collapse it just to a particular level.
okay.
So you can get a breakdown by book, and you can see, oh, it's used more in book 5 than in any of the books. And you can keep drilling down. And it's got the letters as well, which letters mention that word and so on.
Yep.
The letters don't go any more fine grained than the letter itself.
Yeah, which makes sense. Did you, sorry, total side note, are you on the revised letters yet?
So
or
this
no?
is the original.
Okay.
I am working on the revised letters, and one of the things I'm changing, and this comes back to that whole problem of better digitizing the text. At the
Yeah.
moment, the letters search here includes every word on the page. So it
Okay.
includes Humphrey Carpenter's notes about the letter. So if Humphrey Carpenter at
Oh,
the
yeah.
start of the letter says, oh, in 1956, Tolkien received a letter and this was his response, blah, 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 blah. That's included in the search.
Okay.
And much like the distinction between what's spoken by a character versus what's spoken by the narrator,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really want to know what's written by Tolkien versus what's written by Humphrey Carpenter. And so that's another thing that I'm doing as part of the update to the expanded
Okay.
version of
Yeah.
the letters, is doing that separation. Same thing with History of Middle-earth, the distinction between Christopher's commentary and notes versus his father's manuscripts.
Hmm.
That's a huge task, because and Unfinished Tales is like that too. The reason Unfinished Tales doesn't appear here yet,
I think I saw,
there
yeah.
is actually, yeah, but it doesn't distinguish. There's no way, and
Okay.
Unfinished Tales
Between
does
the,
appear there, but you wouldn't be able to search for where it's used by Tolkien versus used by his son Christopher. And History of Middle Earth is a lot more complex. So there's work going on there.
yeah.
So that's the other thing this can be used for is just studying word usage and
Yeah.
how it's used in different places. The flip side of that is, imagine you've got a citation
Hmm.
and you're trying to find that in the book. So we built a sister site called Site Tolkien, and if you drill down in one of those, let's go into pick any of those, expand it till you get to a particular paragraph, and just click on one of those. If you click on that, it will actually take you to the Site
Okay.
Tolkien website, and obviously I can't show the full text.
Yeah.
So what I do is I show the first 3 words and the last word of the
Okay.
paragraph, as well as the beginning and ends of the surrounding paragraphs, to make it much easier to go find. There's 2 things that this site gives you. One is this sort of contextual help to find
Yeah.
where the paragraph is, but also it gives you now a URL that you can post to people. If you're wanting to send
Oh.
somebody a link to a particular paragraph, you can just send them this
Oh.
URL,
Yep.
and
Oh, that's
they'll
cool.
get the information they need to
Okay.
find it.
That's
So
really cool. Did you take any inspiration from Hammond and Skull's, what's it called, the Reader's Companion or whatever? Because they don't do it quite with the full citation, but they have it's in this paragraph and then this sentence and then here's the note
yeah,
about
so what's interesting about their book there is, again, that's very
the page numbers.
similar. They have page numbers, which
Yeah,
means you have to
very
have the same
specific.
edition, right?
Yeah.
And this is a constant problem. History of Middle Earth does this too. So History of Middle Earth,
Hmm.
when it talks about in volumes 6 through 9, when it's talking about Lord of the Rings, it's specifically citing the second edition Lord of the Rings,
Oh.
which very few people have. I have a copy that I bought of it because I wanted to be able to uh, correlate the pages, but it means it's very hard to find.
Okay.
Um, it's quite expensive to get second edition Lords of the Ring. Is that the plural? um, and because most it was reset in 1994, 1995, and most of the editions, like the 50th anniversary edition in 2005,
Yep.
will tend to use that pagination. So
Okay.
something like this paperback that I showed before, this has a particular pagination. This is the one that Hammond and Skull would use.
Okay.
So that's slightly problematic. But what I was going to say about Hammond and Skull's work is, if you think about it, that the way they've structured it is actually still quite similar to a commentary, a Bible commentary, or a
Mm.
commentary on Homer or Beowulf,
Yeah.
in like quoting a bit of text and then having a comment and so on. So it just sort of illustrates again that there's this Tolkien does get approached like these other texts.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do at the Digital Tolkien Project is apply that uh, to apply more digital
Yeah.
techniques to that kind of thing. So there's one more thing I want to show you.
Yeah.
If you go back to the Digital Tolkien, the main site, I want to show you. Go back.
Oh, I have to go back a lot.
Oh, you can click on Digital Tolkien Project.
Of course I can. I know how to work the internet. All right.
So the other thing I wanted to drill a little bit into, and then I can, if there's anything else that stands out, I can talk about it. But
Yeah, I know you have to go at some point, and
it's okay. It's okay. I can go a bit longer. I can go a bit longer. If you click on Tolkien Glossary, we'll go to the Tolkien Glossary. So, and again, this just gives information.
No, that's perfect.
So the Tolkien Glossary is this word-focused view on things. So rather than dealing with the paragraphs, this is dealing with the words. So currently this is the Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings, and the Hobbit. There's about 19,000 different words across those three works. And so if you type in something like Frodo, you can start typing Frodo, will autocomplete.
Oh,
So
and you
if you,
have the okay. That's
so
cool.
if you go to Frodo, so this gives you an overview of things we currently know about the word Frodo. So one
Okay.
of the things you can see is it shows where the word occurs in the
Mhm.
text. And one of the interesting patterns you, of course, notice is that Frodo doesn't appear much at all in book 3.
Yeah.
Of course, because he's not there. He is mentioned though, and this comes back to that thing of the fact that a person is mentioned doesn't mean that they're there in the scene. And so we are doing that separate markup of that information. But this is just the study of the word, and you can hover over and see
Yeah. That's
what
cool.
chapter it is and so on. But there's some other things as well as occurrence information that you get here. So one is we find out all the different larger names that the word Frodo is part of. So sometimes he's referred to as Frodo Baggins, sometimes Frodo of the Nine Fingers, Frodo of the Shire, and so on.
Yeah.
We also get a list here of all of the words, hyphenated words that contain Frodo as a component. And then we get these tags. So we're told that it's the name of a character, that it's the part of a name of a character, and it must be the name of a source. Oh, and we can see it here, the story of Nine-Fingered Frodo and the Ring of Doom. So there, the word Frodo is appearing not in the
Okay.
name of a person, but in the name of a text source,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The story of Nine-Fingered Frodo and the Ring of Doom. So let's actually, to pick another example, let's type in don't, and go to that page.
Don't.
So you can interestingly see this uneven distribution of don't. Don't doesn't appear at all in the appendices. It doesn't appear nearly as much in the second half of book 3 or the first half of or book 5.
Yeah.
It comes back much more in book 6 and so on. Now, we haven't yet incorporated the speaker information into
Okay.
Tolkien glossary yet, but eventually it will be possible to do a breakdown of whether it's the narrator or in speech and who's speaking and so on. But you'll notice these under the tags, it's tagged as apostrophe, contraction NT. I'll get into the VXGL in a moment. But if you're interested in just when is it not contracted as NT, because this is tagged as contraction NT, if you click on contraction NT, this will take you to a page. These are all of the words that have an NT contraction
Oh.
in them, as well as a list of all the occurrences. So this
Yeah.
enables you to see distribution of not only individual words, but words that have been tagged a particular way.
Mhm.
So we're going to continue to tag more and more words with different properties, like whether they're French, whether they're Latinate or Germanic,
Oh, okay.
all that kind of stuff. If you click on tags in the top right corner, you can get a list of all the tags we currently have.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
and so you can see,
Mhm.
for example, one of the things, like if you click Sindarin will be somewhere there.
I can find it eventually. There
It's
we
in
go.
alphabetical order. Yep. So these are all the Sindarin
Ooh.
words in the text, and then if you scroll down, you'll get a
Okay.
distribution of them. Now, some of this is misleading. Some of this needs to be disambiguated because there are some Sindarin words that can be confused with English words.
Okay.
So that does need to be cleaned up. This is probably not as useful. Go to a better one might be like Entish or something like that. So if you go back up to the tag list again, you can see where the Entish words appear. And obviously, if you hover, see there's that big cluster in there. Yeah. So
Yeah. Makes sense.
chapter 4, the tree bed chapter has 36 Entish words. No, so this is again the kind of search that was never possible before.
Yeah.
Without searching each individual word. Now we can tag a word, and we're going to tag them with all sorts of things, parts of speech, and
Okay.
I mentioned etymology. We're going to have pronunciation information here as well, which will help with like seeing when things rhyme or when
Are
they
you going to have
alliterate.
an AI voice do the pronunciation for you?
I mean, I could do. So one of the fun things with the pronunciation is there was good off the shelf tools for doing English pronunciation.
Mm.
like converting, not making the sound, but writing out
Yeah.
the sounds in the International Phonetic Alphabet. That worked great for English, but it was doing a terrible job with Elvish. And so one of the things that I did a couple of months ago was write my own code based on Appendix E to generate what the Elvish given an Elvish word, how do you pronounce that? Because Tolkien gives us enough information in Appendix E to
Yeah.
actually do that pronunciation. So that's another, yet another aspect of the project is
Yeah.
software for doing
Jeez.
that kind of thing. And there's other stuff we're doing um, to do with calendars and timelines and maps and
Hmm.
stuff like that. They're at an earlier stage. But the idea is to really have I mean, a lot of this information is out there in various forms, but one of the struggles is that it's it's not easy to repurpose and do interesting queries on because it tends to be for direct human consumption, right? I mean, it's one thing to have a list of words in a book or an an encyclopedia
Yeah. Yeah.
like Bob Foster's Complete Guide to Middle Earth. It's another thing to have the data in a form that it can be used for queries and research and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that's really what we're trying to do, and why we're trying so hard to tie everything exactly to the text. So it's one thing to have a
Mhm.
timeline, right? So plenty of people have done really cool visualizations of where was the fellowship at various points in time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But because of the data-driven approach that we're taking, we'll be able to produce those kinds of visualizations, but
Oh.
it's going to be tied exactly to the text. So if you're at a point going, "Oh, show me exactly where it says that Pippin is here and Mary's there," right?
Yeah.
It's not just enough to have a result, but actually be able to go back to the text. When we know that something happened on a particular day, how do we know it happened on a particular day? Show me in the text. In some cases, that's a fun little chain of evidence, because sometimes you'll get a passage that says, the next day, Pippin
Mm.
woke up and said blah 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 blah. In
Yeah.
order to know what the next day is, you need to know what the previous day is, and so
Mhm.
there's this sort of, how do we tie all that together?
Yeah.
And again, this is sort of part of what we're doing, is annotating the text at that level of detail, so that we have all that data available for the kind of questions that people want to answer.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I love I this yeah, like the occurrences, like timeline or whatever you wanna call it. I'm not sure. The plot? I don't know.
Yep.
Oh, rug plot. It says it right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when it's got the little fiber sticking up, you can click on histogram and you'll actually kind of get a more of a bar chart version of it
Oh,
that just sort
okay.
of shows
Oh, that's cool.
broadly chapter by chapter. But if you want the individual
Yeah,
occurrences
but you
as
know
little
exactly where it is.
fibers in the rug, yeah,
That's so
that's what that's
cool.
showing.
I love that. And now, okay, I'm I could probably ask a million questions and
Please do. I've got a bit more.
take you until
I've got a bit
tomorrow.
more time. I've got a bit more. I know I've got a bit more time. Feel free to.
Okay, so, there's one question that I really wanted to ask was, are you and how are you, if you are, utilizing AI in this?
Hmm.
Like, are you like, because ethical issues aside with it,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, it can do really cool things in terms of, like collating or whatever you wanna call it.
Yeah.
How are you utilizing it? How are you, if you are?
So really, the only way that it's interesting. One of the strengths. So um, one of the things people forget when they talk about AI now, it tends to get used nowadays in a particularly narrow way, when really, AI has been something that people have been trying to do for, for 70 years now.
Yeah.
And one of the major applications of it has always been in linguistics,
Mm,
and studying languages and so on. And AI has had an incredibly positive effect on kind of the success in accuracy of a lot of linguistic analysis at scale.
okay.
Um, and that at scale is really important. So one of the things. So coming back to the work I do on ancient Greek,
Mhm.
the Perseus Digital Library has something like 30 million words of Greek. There is no way for a human to go through each individual word and check. Oh, if I want to parse this word and find out what tense is the verb and all this kind
Yeah.
of stuff. So it's been all these for decades and decades. People have tried to write software to do that kind of thing, and gotten pretty good at in many cases, where a lot of the computational approaches have struggled with those kind of linguistic tasks is taking the context into account. So if a word is unambiguously a past tense verb or something, then it's fairly easy to write rules on a computer that identify that.
Yeah.
But when you have ambiguity where it's sort of like, oh, well, depending on the context, this could be a past tense verb or it could be an adjective or whatever. You need to understand the context, and it's much, much harder to write explicit rules for doing that. Um, Modern deep learning based natural language processing tools do a much better job of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Like unbelievably. And I've seen this development. I've been, doing this for 30 years now, and just the shift has been incredible in what we can
Wow.
do at scale. Now, when you're dealing with a small text, the benefits are a lot less because it becomes more feasible to have humans check stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So it makes sense to apply these when you've got 30 million words. If you've only got 100,000 words, they can be a helpful starting point. And and so the one place that that sort of natural language processing has been used is in the part of speech tagging. So identifying what are the nouns, what are the verbs, what are the
Okay.
adjectives,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I have done that using AI. One thing that could AI could be used for, but I'm not using it for, is in identifying the characters and so on. And one of
Mm.
the reasons for that is, again, we're dealing with a relatively small text, all things considered. It's not
Yeah.
like I'm doing millions or billions of words. And people don't, in the case of Tolkien, people don't mind manually going through and reading the text and
Oh
identifying
heavens, I
stuff.
got to read it again. Darn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So even though it might take a year instead of 10 minutes, in some senses it can be worth it because we're going to get extra stuff out of that anyway.
Yeah.
That said, one of the things that I have been playing around with some of these recent large language models is interrogating them about what's going on in a paragraph, and it is really remarkable how
Mm.
much um, things like that time of day kind of thing, or what day it is, the fact that it says the
Yeah.
next day this happened, blah 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 blah. Like you can feed it paragraphs of text and say who's there, who's in the scene versus who's just being talked about, where are they, what time of day is it, that sort of stuff. It's remarkably good at. And so
Hmm.
I'm certainly interested in that for larger scale things. If you're wanting to study 1,000 novels, then there's no way you're going to get humans to annotate that.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I'm personally optimistic about its use in computational literary studies more
Mhm.
broadly. In the limited scope of dealing with Tolkien's text, I'm not using it maybe nearly as much as people might expect, but purely because we are dealing with a finite text of fairly small size,
Yeah.
and it's not difficult to spend years working on one text. And so, yeah. I mean, there may be other things that come. Oh, what? Okay. So there is another really, I think, positive example of it. One thing that I've been working on is aligning texts with audiobooks.
Oh yeah.
So imagine you had a reference number to a paragraph and you wanted to know what's the time code in Andy
Mm.
Serkis's reading of it, right? So you've got LR3.03.016 or something, right? I want to jump to Andy Serkis reading that.
Oh
Um,
wow.
how do I know the time code? Well, I could go through and listen to every paragraph Andy says and look up what the paragraph reference is and look at the time code and enter it in a spreadsheet or something. Instead, what I can do is run the audiobook through a transcription that
Mhm.
includes time codes.
Yeah.
And then I can take that transcription, and this is the fun thing about this. It doesn't even matter if there are mistakes in the transcription because I'm not actually using the transcription. I'm just
Yeah.
using the time codes. I then go match the transcription with
Oh, that's
the
cool.
actual text and then use the time code. And now I've got a time code. So
Yeah.
the other thing I've played around with doing that for is I've started compiling together various documentaries about Tolkien and interviews of Tolkien and stuff like that.
Oh.
Run those through a transcription service, and now all of a sudden it becomes searchable. So if you're wondering, when did Tolkien say this word? Now, this is the sort of thing that, yes, somebody could transcribe it, and it's worth probably correcting it. But as a first pass to having a searchable, searchable interviews and documentaries and stuff like that,
Yeah.
it works really well. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. All right. If you permit, I have one
Yeah,
other
absolutely.
question.
Absolutely. Not a problem at all.
So first off, anybody watching, listening, you need to watch Rings and Realms also. And I forget what they're called. But James talks about
The retrospectives or something?
yes, the
Yeah.
retrospectives, because
Yep.
you did half of a retrospective talking about the digital Tolkien project and not Rings and Rings of Power.
Yep.
But however, whatever you like, whether you like it or not, whatever.
You
I
can
like
quickly
what
bring it up. While you're talking about it, you
Yes.
can quickly bring it up if you go to ropdata.digitaltalking.com, or it's linked to, if you go to the Digital
Rob
Talking Project.
Data. Digital Tolkien what is .com,
Com.
right?
Yep.
No.
Rop data.
Oh, data. I put date. That's user error again.
Why isn't that working? What's
ropdata.digital?
Oh, is it just, maybe it's just Rob? I can't go to digitaltalking.com. I linked to it from there.
I have to go back because it's weird.
It's linked in the footer, but yeah, if you
okay.
Rop data site in the middle, second from the bottom under websites.
There we go. Okay, cool.
And then it's just Rop.
Rop.
I gave you the wrong.
It's fine. Yeah. Okay. So you're doing like the coolest stuff with this, and I'm a lurker on your Discord channel.
Mhm.
By the way, I'm one of the ones that's not helping. Sorry.
That's fine.
But
there are hundreds of you. Hundreds.
Yes. And I've only been able to like loosely really follow. So I didn't realize we were like you had progressed as far as you had, which is awesome. But yeah, you can do so many things here. So again, I know you got, I don't want to keep you too long, but can you like 30,000 foot view of all of like everything you've done here?
Yeah.
It's so much.
So what we did with Rings of Power was we took the subtitle files. So videos that have subtitles, they produce effectively a transcript with time codes.
Yeah.
Although they're not automatically generated. They're made by the production company or the studio or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we took those. So that gives a time code and what's said. So it's not describing what's happening necessarily. We don't get information about where they are or whatever. And occasionally it'll give descriptions about things that are going on, but we actually don't use those. We take just the speech, the things that are spoken with the time codes for each episode. And then we crowdsourced this. So again, a group of people involved in the project went through and did the speaker identification. So, Galadriel's saying this, Elrond's saying this, Gil-galad's saying this. So we went through that. We also mark when are the scene transitions and where are we located in each place.
Yep.
And then all that gets fed into this. So here's the scene background. So then the other thing we did is we came up with a name for each scene. So there's a summary of each episode with each scene, what location it's in, and we know within that what characters are saying what. So if you click on one of those scenes, you click on one of those scenes, the stranger in Nori catch Poppy. So I don't show all the text, but I show the first two words of every line with the time codes.
Oh, that's cool.
And so if you're wondering where things are said, I have all the data, but I just, for copyright reasons, don't show it. I would love it if Amazon just said, go ahead and show it. I don't see what the harm would be, to be honest. But
yeah.
But yeah, so you can do all sorts of things. You can look at how much time is spent in different regions. So if you look at if you go back to like season 2 or something, or even just this episode, you can see how much time is spent in the different regions just within this episode.
Yeah.
And you could click on one of those regions and get information about across the episodes how much time was spent in Linden,
even both seasons,
what characters are speaking, and then what all the individual scenes that take part in that region. if you
Maggie
go
must have like gushed over this like fully.
so yeah, click on like Galadriel as well, so you can get character information as well. So we get how much she's speaking
Oh
in each
wow.
episode, how many scenes she's in each episode, then this kind of plot of where in each episode she's speaking,
Okay.
and then
All the scenes.
all the scenes that
That's
she's in.
all of them.
Yep.
Wow, that's cool.
But again, this sort of illustrates this idea that so these are all different visualizations and aggregations of numbers
Yeah.
based on this data once we have the data. So the pattern here applies to what we're doing with Tolkien's text as well,
Mhm.
which is you start off sort of with this raw data and then you annotate it in a certain way.
Yep.
And then you have a data set that you can do interesting queries on and visualizations and aggregations on. Yeah.
That's that's awesome. Did you I know you did a I think you did the like the color, the palette like graph. Is that on here or no?
It's not on here. I did
Okay.
post a bunch of stuff to Instagram on that.
Okay. I'll have
The
to double
Digital
check on
Talking
that.
Project Instagram has some of those. Yeah, I'd like to incorporate it at some point, and I actually had some fun conversations with the main cinematographer on Rings of
Oh,
Power. He loved what I was doing with that. It's really interesting looking at the color palette and how that
yeah.
shifts from episode to episode and
Yeah.
so on. Yeah.
Oh man, that's so cool. Awesome. I'm gonna I have a research project that I am like thinking out that I want to maybe do like a regional moot or something on, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna have to use Digital Tolkien Project, I think, to help. Although you don't have all of the history of Middle Earth yet, so that might
Well,
hinder
let
me.
me know. So one of the things, and this is an important message for your listeners. If you have particular research questions, I'd love to know. I'd love to hear them and how
Mm,
I can facilitate them. Because in many cases, even if the data hasn't been exposed yet on the Digital Tolkien Project websites,
yeah.
I may have it. I may have stuff
Oh,
that's
okay.
useful to you. There may be things I can do. Plus, there are so many possibilities. There's decades worth of work still to do.
Sure.
And so one of the challenges that I have is how do I prioritize? Um, and so people having particular questions helps me with that.
Mm,
So if people have like, for example, that question of do different characters speak differently, uh, led to us doing the speaker identification.
yeah.
And the question of does Tolkien use Germanic words more in some places than in others is what's leading to, um, tagging all the words with their etymology. The question of, where does Tolkien use Sindarin, Elvish words as opposed to um, English words and so on.
Yeah.
All those kind of questions. Does what adjectives are used to describe Galadriel? And whatever questions people have, they there's uh, a process we can go through to
Yeah.
improve our data to be able to answer those questions.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, I will let you go. We've run over time. You've graciously let us
not a
talk
problem
forever.
at all.
But thank you, James. Again, thank you so much for
My
coming
pleasure.
on. And hey, maybe we'll be able to talk in the future about some, or I'll see you on
Excellent.
space. We'll see.
Yep.
Or what is it? Signum tutorials. We'll do that
Yeah.
too.
Yep. Absolutely.
Oh, so quickly.
Yes.
People, if they want to help out with Digital Tolkien Project or join the Discord, see what's going on. I know on the website, which is digitaltolkien.com. There's a
Yep.
lot of stuff there for how to use it. And
Yep.
then is Discord linked on there, all that stuff?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I would say that the two most helpful things for people that are interested in getting involved is come on the Discord and lurk. But also, if you look at, when you were clicking on these various things on that page, it was taking you to a list of resources about each of those things, right? So if you click on something like Search Tolkien, it's not just giving you a link; it's giving you also links to videos. So I've
Okay.
done a lot of YouTube videos, and so I would say the combination, and this was put together by one of our contributors, Jenny King,
Okay.
Jenny Star Stuff, as she's more often known. Um, she went through all the videos and like put together time codes of when does James talk about Cite Tolkien and when does James talk about the Tolkien glossary and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really useful way because I started off doing monthly. They're less than monthly now,
Yeah.
but I
It's tough.
do videos and regular updates on
Mhm.
YouTube about what's going on. And so I would encourage people to watch those, and lurk on the Discord
Yeah.
as a great way of finding out what's going on. And
So,
if
yeah.
anything interests you in particular, there's so many things that people can get involved in, including just asking questions, having research questions that can help prioritize.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And get you figure out, but okay, hey, we didn't think of this or something like that. Right.
exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. I'll put some links in the description too, so people can find things a little bit easier.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, James.
My
And
pleasure.
yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jeremy.